I'm Jim Check. You're watching Kelowna Now. Today I have with me, Bhupinder Hundal. Did I get that right? I get that close?
Yeah, no, you got it. You got it.
And he's the news director for Global in BC. So Global BC and Global Okanagan, the news director. And we're having you in today because we've done a few stories. We've done stories with Kent, I think, did the first story. Kent Mulgat did the first story with Mohini Singh and Rick Weber. All three of them former employees of Global Okanagan or CHBC in its time, right? And they had some concerns over the recent news from Global. Maybe you can share some of what's going on with Global Okanagan.
Look, I think there is no question. Anybody who's been following the media industry, the business, I know you have been following it quite closely. There are things that have been happening in the journalism ecosystem.
Just the media in general.
Media in general, right across the country for, better part of a decade.
Yeah.
That has really put considerable strain on all types of media outlets, whether they're in smaller markets, larger markets, platform agnostic. There have been significant challenges when it comes to doing journalism. And I think obviously that is of great concern to everyone who's a part of the business, myself included. It is a challenging time. Certainly when it comes to Global Okanagan, there obviously have been some shifts that have occurred. There have been some reductions, obviously, at Global Okanagan. And I think, spending the last month just really looking at the importance of what Global Okanagan is to the Okanagan Valley, Kelowna in particular, the affinity that people have here, the connection that people have here to that station. It is a 65-year institution in this community. And it's near and dear to so many here, and it's near and dear to, and it's played a big role in this province. And I think we all fully recognize that, and I personally do recognize that now that I'm kind of now responsible for this over the last month. I think moving forward here for Global Okanagan, one thing that is going to remain to be the case is we are going to be doing local Okanagan news.
So you're going to have reporters and journalists on the ground here.
Reporters and journalists will be on the ground and will remain on the ground. There will be Okanagan newscasts starting on Monday. It'll be 5:30, 6:30, 11 o'clock. It will also air 9:30 on BC One. It will also be available for streaming on the Global TV app, on all of our platforms, on Amazon and on Roku TV, wherever you might find the Global News app. It will be simulcast there. So there will be access for the community to news from Global Okanagan.
But it won't be out of the studio here, per se, right?
Yeah. So, when we talk about changes in the media landscape, like here you and I, we're talking here and we're on video right now.
Correct.
And this is being recorded and produced, and it's going to be put out to the public. I think part of the challenge that I think, many folks don't see, I guess, that really does have an impact on the day-to-day operations is when you're running a full-scale television station, there are many infrastructure costs that are part of just making that thing go. And it's really hard in this climate of, fragmentation of the media.
Shrinking revenues.
Yeah. I mean, I know you're in the creative business as well and in the marketing space. Marketing advertising dollars are being distributed in different ways as it has been in the past too. In the past, it was far easier to recoup those infrastructure costs that you have to run a full-scale television operation. That is becoming more difficult regardless of the size of the market or what station it is. Every single media outlet is facing that challenge and have been facing that challenge, for many, many years right now. And I think when it comes to Global Okanagan, we are going to utilize Global BC as a means of taking that pressure off so that the focus can remain on making sure that we can have journalists on the ground covering the stories in the community. And I think, part of our challenge is we, as media organizations, is try to find different ways of doing things, because if we keep doing the same thing, it's not going to keep working anymore because the landscape has changed. I think our focus here is let's keep our journalists on the ground. Let's keep covering Okanagan stories. Let's ensure that we are telling the stories of the community that are important to the community here. And we do it in a manner that's going to help better support the team that's going to operate here with the backing of the Global BC team. So over the last month, we have been really working hard on making sure that our team that is going to be here at Global Okanagan is well supported by the team at Global BC. And one of the things that I want to stress, and I've stressed this to our group internally, and I will say it now to everyone here, the Okanagan Valley is a huge part of not just this community, but it's a huge part of BC. Mm-hmm. And not only is that important to Global Okanagan success, it is important to Global BC success. We are Global BC. We're not Global Vancouver, right? Yeah. So we are Global BC. One of our core pillars is to ensure that we are reflective and representative of the province, and we are reflecting the province back on it. So my goal here as we move forward is that we're going to come together as one family. Obviously, there's difficult times and difficult challenges that we're facing, but I always have this perspective, and whether it be in your professional life and your personal life, we're always going to go through moments of incredible joy and celebration, but we're also going to, at the same time in our lives, go through challenges and significant adversity that we're all going to face in whatever form it may take. But I think in those moments, it's really important that everybody bands together. We lend a hand, we support each other. And I know internally within the Global News organization, our team at Global BC and Global Okanagan have been working hard to come together, to be supportive of one another, to ensure that we can continue to provide the best possible news coverage in Global Okanagan and for Global BC. And I think we can do that. I think there are opportunities that we can continue to do great, solid journalism in this market.
Yeah, I mean, it's fairly obvious to people, especially if you look at stock charts now of the public companies, that there is significant financial strain in the media in general. It's not just Global's Chorus's stock chart. It's Glacier. I can go through the list. They're Post Media. You can see they're all suffering. That there is financial strain on media in general, and with that, most people really care about what's coming through to them, right? The content. Right. And what you're saying is the content will still be there. It'll just be distributed in a more efficient manner at this time, because you have to kind of pull back. No different than a family. If all of a sudden one person loses their job, you just still got to put food on the table. You still got to kind of get through the day.
Yes.
And some people obviously have a physical attachment to the building, and I would say, like especially the people that worked in that building, there will be some emotional attachment to that physical building.
No question.
And then but at the end of the day, as we face all these financial concerns, and us and as well, and I like what you said, when we all have to work together, and I believe that all media has to work together, and I thank you for coming into KelownaNow and talking with us as well, that I think in these tough times, media needs to be responsible to each other as well. I think that because it is a tough time for media, right? It is a very tough time. Bill C-18, which was put into place supposedly to help us, has hurt media in general. There's 11 million less views per day of news stories across Canada per day. And that was a study that was just released. I just did a story with CBC. That is hurting so many people, right? Not being able to put content on a platform where most people go all the time.
Yeah, and I think these are, you've eloquently put it, many of the challenges, and again, I think, me being here, I think once upon a time it would be like, oh, we're competitors, yeah. Or Global and CTV are competitors. I think the landscape and the tone and the perspective, I think, is changing. Yes, we obviously do want to do better stories than KelownaNow. We want to do better journalism, and you're going to do the same when it comes to trying to do a better job than Global Okanagan.
That's what makes us better.
That's what makes us better. Yeah. But I think overall, for the communities where journalism is being served, having robust options and having multiple journalists from multiple organizations being able to do the work and tell stories, I think is healthy for everyone. Yeah. And I think ultimately that is our goal. Like we want a robust journalism industry. We want stories to be told. One of the concerns across the country is that where there are no journalists who's asking those questions, right? How
do we hold
how
power
do we,
accountable
how do
if
we
we're
hold
not?
power to account? And I think those are concerns that everyone has. And we do too. Like, I can tell you it, and I know you've gone through this situation yourself as well as a result of things that are happening in the industry, and you got to make tough decisions and tough choices. Nobody in the news business wants to be like, okay, let's do less news.
Yeah, nobody
Like
wants
that
to do
doesn't.
Right? That's just basically you're saying you set the clock and you're waiting to fade out.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody really is looking to do that. But I do think that we do need to have a conversation about the significant challenges that are present, and how do we start thinking creatively and differently about how to tackle those things. And I think, from a regulatory perspective, I was kind of having this conversation just a while ago with someone. It's like, the landscape and the media is changing so quickly, but the pace at which, the regulatory environment or whatnot is moving at is like, driving 50 on the Coquihalla Highway, right? So I think though there are, several challenges that are putting pressure on media outlets right across the country. But, my personal perspective on a lot of things, and I've used this in my life in general, and I apply this to what we do at Global BC and now Global Okanagan, and that is, even in front of challenges, we can only control what we can control. And we're going to do the best possible thing that we can with what we've got. And we're always going to try to seek out opportunities when we can find them. And I've always tried to apply that philosophy in my own life. Like I'm, on a personal level, I don't think anybody would have expected that a turban Sikh man like me would be running Global BC. I'd never thought in my dreams that would be in the cards. But I think a lot of things can be possible. If you're only going to look at the challenges that are in front of you, you're not going to be able to look at the opportunities. And right now, I think we want to focus on what those opportunities are and try to position ourselves to do the best we can and serve this community the best.
And I think that's been the model for KelownaNow since we started, because we started, we're I think the youngest media outlet here.
Yeah.
And we're in a very crowded market too, right? And we kind of did things a little bit different. And we have one of the most experienced newsrooms in the Okanagan with the likes of Kent Mulgat and Steve McNall and stuff like that. And, Ian, who's been with the Daily Mail and stuff like that. So we have an experienced team. And to us, the story we always talk about, the story is the most important thing, right? It's the content, right? The rest of it's distribution, right? And it's just, and the new world says there's different ways to distribute stuff. And, whether that's on YouTube and Facebook and global channels or whatever, television, I mean, that's a channel that a lot of people are used to. But I would guess that a lot of your audience doesn't come generally through the television station anymore. It comes through all the other distribution that you do, like online or wherever you're putting the stuff through.
Yeah, I think generally the challenge for the television market is that is where the bulk of our revenue is coming from,
right?
In order for you to operate, versus the other platforms that you're also servicing. But at the same time, the thing that is bringing in the most revenue is bringing in less revenue each and every opportunity.
The most views is bringing,
and that is shifting towards another place.
So we need to figure out a way to make it work so that, for everybody, because we put our content on YouTube and you get some, you get a few coins for it, but you don't get a ton. And then this fight right now with Bill C-18, which is in our minds is a detriment to us because it takes away a big audience from us that we generated. 80% of our traffic was coming from there, right? So to take that away from us was definitely, we had the biggest social footprint in the Okanagan, and they basically took that away. There needs to be a way for Facebook or Meta and the federal government to get back together at the table and find a better solution to this, right? Other than using media as the ping pong ball in this, where we don't get a lot of say.
And well, that's the thing. You don't have the control over that situation. I obviously don't have control over that situation. We are trying to navigate this changing and shifting landscape the best we can with what we have, and that's where I think it's really putting significant strain, but also a challenge on everyone. But I really do feel that there are opportunities that we have. That we can service and continue to service this community. I know when change happens, there's a lot of anxiety that comes with it, which is understandable. but one of the things that I've been, super happy about thus far is the manner and the professionalism and the conduct of the people at Global Okanagan and the way they've handled themselves through this whole process. Our teams at Global BC, how they're working together, they're coming together. It's really like a community coming together to help each other, right? And we've seen this time and time again in this region, right? Where things have happened and the community has gone through, tough situations like a year ago, where the community does band together and they support each other through tough, trying times. I'm glad to see that that's taking place within our global team, but I also know this community is really passionate and loves and cares about Global Okanagan and KelownaNow and all of the other entities that exist here. And I think there is an opportunity for the community to come together and support.
So I get some of the people that have an attachment to that building, I imagine that building will be sold because it's worth quite a bit of money, the land it sits on at some point. And I know that's not kind of in your purview.
Yeah, that
make those decisions or anything.
Yeah, that is definitely not in my purview, particularly as to what happens with the building. But obviously there are conversations about what the future of that building.
Where the reporters and journalists would report to and where they would go to get.
Yes.
Yeah, they would need another location, I imagine, at some point.
Yes, and we will ensure that, we're going to find a location that is going to work here in the Okanagan region.
We got some office space we can lend you.
Okay, well, maybe we'll talk after this.
Anyway, I do think, I look at things usually with a glass half full too, that there's opportunities even for us losing our Facebook audience and Instagram audience. We've put a lot more attention into YouTube. We do a lot more video now. We're probably 5 or 10x in what we did for video before to what we do now, and we're pushing more into X and we're pushing more into YouTube, and obviously our newsletter is very large. We have 35,000 I think in our newsletter, our daily newsletter. So we're trying to use every channel we can to kind of get the news into the public, because that's the way we can kind of keep them safe and informed too, right? So
yeah, and look, I know change is always hard and it's difficult, and you've just given an example of how you've had to shift kind of what it is that you're doing because of what's happening. And we're now having to go through that exercise here as well. But I do want to stress that we are going to be doing Okanagan news. We are going to be doing news in this community. We are going to have journalists who are going to continue to tell stories from this community. It will be leading the newscast. Now, I know people have been accustomed to watching the 1 hour newscast from 5 to 6 o'clock every evening, Monday to Friday. That's going to be a half hour now from 5:30 to 6. But that half hour is going to be focused on the
That'll
Okanagan.
be like a Global Okanagan broadcast.
That is going to be a Global Okanagan. Now, the 1 hour broadcast that we did have was, yes, being anchored out of here. But it featured also Okanagan news, but also national news and other components as well. I think what we want to do with the half hour is really keep it focused on the Okanagan and big BC stories that people here want to know about. So we are really going to be focusing on delivering the most impactful 30-minute newscast that we can at 5:30 and 6:30 and 11:30 or 11 o'clock and at 9:30 on BC One, just to make sure that we are delivering Okanagan news for Okanagan, for the Okanagan Valley.
Right, and you probably can't answer this, but I'll ask it anyway. With these changes, will this give Global BC enough runway to kind of tough it out for these next couple of years to maybe things get better?
I'm optimistic. Obviously, it still is a challenging time on multiple fronts, but I am optimistic. I mean, Global BC and Global Okanagan have very deep roots and deep connections in this community. And I believe that we have strong journalists, capable journalists, trustworthy journalists, that the community is going to continue to support and continue to engage as we move forward. So I feel like, yes, it is, obviously turbulent times and it is a bit shaky right now, but I do firmly believe that we are going to be a big part of the lives of people here in BC, and especially during moments when they need us. I just think back to a year ago, Global BC and Global Okanagan and BC One streaming news, having live coverage of everything that was going on just to keep everybody up to date on the wildfire. That's a responsibility and a huge responsibility that we have to ensure that the communities are informed about what is happening, especially in key moments like that, an emergency situation. We want to ensure that we'll be there for those moments. and people are depending on us to be there. And I think that's a responsibility that we take seriously, and we're going to continue to ensure that we're going to find ways to do that as we move forward.
Our managing editor, Ian Burns, has said, and I believe this, is with the stress on media, we do have a lot of YouTube channels and the stuff that come up that are kind of like not fact checking their stories. They're kind of even stealing some of our content, putting it on Facebook, and then just kind of twisting it to their narrative without having to fact check. So the danger of not having journalists that are trained is that, like, we have a lot more bias in the media then, right? Or where the people are getting their information in kind of like echo chambers and stuff like that.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. And our job is to ensure that we are going to do the best possible journalism we can, and to ensure that we are doing that rigorous fact checking. Like with anything that involves humans, we're not going to be perfect every single time. But I think, what is the day in and day out objective, and what's the goal of what we have to do each and every day? We want to make sure that we're putting out the best possible content that matters to people in their communities, and we're telling stories that matter to people who live here. That is really important. That's the basic crux of what it is that we do and why we do it. And of course, if there are concerns that are happening in the community, taking it to the people in positions of power and holding them to account. That is going to be...
That's our main function.
That's our main function. And it's an important pillar of ensuring that we have a robust democracy and robust dialogue about major issues in our community. And we are going to continue to do that.
Is there anything else that was said earlier on some of our stories that you want to clear up, or is that kind of like all covered so far?
No, I mean, I just want to reiterate to everyone, like, obviously I have been reading and watching and reading the commentary and reading what the feedback has been. We've had people who have written in, we've had people who have left messages. And I think sometimes in the midst of everything that's going on, it's important to kind of take a step back and just have the opportunity to think and evaluate and come up with a plan. I think we have spent the time to do that over the last several weeks. I think moving forward, we have the power of Global Okanagan and their great journalists, supported by the power of Global BC, and they're going to work together to ensure that we're going to deliver Okanagan newscasts, and we're going to continue to do that. And I've read the comments about, oh my God, we're just going to have Vancouver news rammed down our throat. I have read them, I understand them, and I can, and on that point, like, I understand where that comes from, right? Like, I grew up in a small town, not here. I grew up in a small town in BC, in Port Alberni on Vancouver Island. Back in the day, like, people in the central part of the island used to think that Czech didn't care about them because they're only about Victoria. And then, Vancouver Island thinks that the mainland doesn't care about them.
It's a natural tendency.
It's a natural tendency that we all have. Or like, us in BC, well, Toronto doesn't care about us.
Well, Vernon will think of that of Kelowna.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
So that element is always going to be there. And I understand that. I've lived through those things on both ends, being somebody who's
all you can do is prove them wrong.
Yeah, and our task here is going to be to continue to make sure that we are delivering what the audience is expecting and do it to the best of our ability. We're going to have journalists on the ground. We're going to continue to do stories, and those stories are also going to feature more prominently on our Global BC newscast from morning to night, and on BC One. We're going to continue to feature also more prominently Kelowna and Okanagan stories in those newscasts as well.
And one of the things that I kind of in my life, I say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And you know what I mean? The challenges, and I think you said the same thing, the challenges that we face are opportunities to get better.
Right? Yeah, so, absolutely. And we're going to give it our best shot.
Yeah. I thank you for coming in, and that's been
Well, thank you
great,
for having me.
Because it's unusual for us to do this too, right? So
yeah, and sometimes you just got to do things a little bit differently, and it's okay to do that, right? Yeah. But I appreciate you and having the time, and I think what you're doing with KelownaNow and the success that you're having. I mean, we may be competitors in the journalism landscape, but I am always going to cheer for journalists doing their great job and support them as best we can. Yes, there are going to be days where we're going to be competitors, but we're also colleagues and we want the same thing ultimately, and that is to serve our community.
And I would echo that. I think to have a healthy community, we need multiple voices for sure, right? Because we hold each other accountable in that way too, right? So,
100%.
And I think, and we also, competition makes everybody better, right? So
I couldn't agree more.
And I thank you for coming in, and I thank you for watching Kelowna Now.